Generally what we do is kind of try to hold them to the end. If you want to make a note of it, if you're on Zoom and you want to put it in the chat, we'll be monitoring that. And so we'll make sure there's time for question and answer. And then at the end, I'll do a quick little outro with a few announcements before we close out the evening. Okay, so for now, we look forward to having you. If you're on Zoom, please keep your microphone muted. And Erik, come on up, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Debbie. It's an honor to be able to present here this evening to the Breast Cancer Network of Western New York. As Amy highlighted, my name is Erikson Neilans. I have a little bit of a background I want to share, not because this is a presentation about me, but more of where my passion really lies is being able to share a lot of the education that I've had the opportunity to attain, and how is it applicable to you, to those that you may know, and what does that research say about how to be able to support during times that an individual may be going through. And so the way that I structured this presentation this evening was an opportunity to share this information, a little bit of the theory behind it, the education behind it. I'm then going to proceed a bit into then what we've even seen on our side with Au Naturel, actually talking about our social media and some of the information, the data that I think supports this topic of emotional agility or emotion validation. The two are going to go hand in hand. And then I did leave time at the end, especially if there are questions that you have, but I am happy then to take those as they come in as well, if there's something in particular is of interest to you. So as Amy highlighted, my background's in an area called behavioral neuroscience. It's really this blend between psychology and how we know that people tend to think, how they behave, along with then the biological psychology of it. So the neuroscience side, what's going on in our brain, and really this blend between the two to give us then some advancements in how it is that we're human. At the end of the day, no matter how old you are, no matter what background you have, we're human beings. And understanding that science of being human can really help us then to build those more effective connections with those around us. And I think especially now, during and maybe post-COVID times, how is it that we're able then to still continue to build those important relationships with those around us? So I do also teach. I teach at the community college here at SUNY Erie. It's always an opportunity to be able to make that impact to our local community. And then as Amy highlighted, I've had the opportunity, especially the last 2 years, to really be able to advance our brands, our awareness of Au Naturel Boutique, which does specialize in post-mastectomy products. And one of the slogans that we have in our collaboration with Amona, which is one of our main providers, is supporting confidence. And I think that's such a powerful sentiment to think about, because confidence is such a spectrum. Where does that come from? And what is it that then is going to provide that type of confidence to it? But there's confidence that comes from all emotions. And this is, I think, always a fun slide to start off with, what this presentation today is going to be about when it comes to this idea of emotional agility or emotion validation. So we all have emotions, but there's some of them that probably you're more willing to express or share, to express, to maybe have that happen than others. Right, so if I came in here happy, jovial, maybe that's what you're seeing right now, probably each of you would be like, yeah, that's great, right? It's maybe magnetic, maybe it's energetic, but what if I came in sad? What if I came in angry? What if I came in frustrated? How do you approach someone who has those emotions at hand? I know I didn't say necessarily there was going to be some questions, but we'll have some questions here, right now. So if I came in, angry, hot, heated, are you going to have that same connection? No, I love that. So I really appreciate that answer, right?
Stay away.
Stay away. I'm not touching with the 10-foot pole, right? Please get me out. There's the exit right there. What if I came in sad?
Someone would be more likely to approach you like me to see if they could comfort you.
I like that, right? There still may be this ability to approach. What may be some things that are said if you saw that I was sad?
You're saying what would your
What would you say to me if I was sad? Came in crying, hunched over.
Are you okay?
Are
Can
you
I
okay?
help you with anything?
Can I help you? I like that. That's great. Any others?
We sometimes have a tendency to ask someone to say, oh, it's okay, don't cry.
I love that, right? It's okay, don't cry, right? That's a powerful one. I think that's great. What if I came in angry, frustrated? What may be another common thing that are said?
What happened to you?
Okay, it could be. That's a great question to ask.
Same thing, what's wrong?
Maybe what's wrong? How many of you hear that word calm down?
Oh, yeah.
Right? You automatically get the
Yeah.
response there, right? And so what becomes fascinating here in terms of this emotional agility topic and emotional validation topic is that our brain, our nervous system has the ability to have all of these emotions. It's not just certain ones. All of them are present. And the reason why that's important to highlight is then because our nervous system, because our brain, because our mind has the capability to produce and experience all these emotions, they must have a purpose, right? They must have a value. Otherwise, why would your body have spent all this real estate, all this energy producing these emotions when they don't have a purpose? But do we conceptualize them in that way? Or do we express them in that way? Because if I ask the question, if I came up and happy here, would you say to me, hey, quit smiling? No. But we do it when we're sad. Don't cry. Or we tell someone, hey, don't be angry. And the question I want you to think about is, when someone is having this emotion, do I honor it? Right? Do I honor it? And I use that word specifically because honor can mean something unique to each one of you. Right? Maybe you know that person in a certain way, so you know what makes them tick. So there's a way in which you can communicate that I honor that you're upset, that you're happy, that you're angry. Because all of those emotions have a purpose. Because interestingly enough, the question that comes up is like, why do we have emotions? If you think about it, right, it's not necessarily going to help me survive in some way. It's not going to help me fight something in some way. It's not going to help me run away from something in some way. But emotions have two components to them. There's a subjective feeling. Right? So all these emotions, happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, anger, there's that subjectivity that we each experience, but there's also a physiological component to it as well. So how many of you are smart watch or device at this time? I don't know if anyone does. Well, if you do, or if you know someone who does, right, it's able to keep track of things like your heart rate, blood pressure, potentially things along those lines. And so when you have an emotional response, your body actually responds physiologically to it. So when I'm angry, blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up. When I'm happy, you might see it then calm down, or lower, I should say, not calm down. When it's that I'm excited, it goes back up. So there's always this physiological side to these emotions. And I say that because what that highlights is that's important. What that's indicating to your mind is that situation is important to you. That's what years of this research is suggesting is the common denominator is that when you experience an emotional event, that emotion, that situation was important to you. And the emotion is the way to tell your body what you're experiencing. Hey, this is important. Pay attention to it. There's no book of life that says when this happens, I need you to pay attention to it. It doesn't happen. It just isn't there. So one of the leading arguments about why emotions are there in the first place is it's the way for you to know that this situation is one that's important to pay attention to. Now, the challenge is this. Someone else may have had this emotion happen, but you don't. So what that's indicating is that for you, you may be in a state where you're calm, you're cool, you're collected, but are you then honoring for that other individual that what they're going through is important to them? Right? Because at that point in time, if there's a change in their behavior, if there's a situation that then evokes this emotional response, it means it must have been important to that individual. And am I communicating in a way that reciprocates and indicates that this was important to them? And it's not just when they're happy. It's when they're sad. It's when they're angry. It's when they're frustrated or when they're frustrated. It's that ability to say to every individual that I understand that this is important to you. But there are certain things, right, that we have inside our experience our social norms, the things that we've grown up with, that probably we're used to, right? None of us would probably do this. Unless maybe, you know, there's something going on with that individual, or it's like they're being witty or something along those lines. But more times than not, you see someone come in happy. Yeah, that's great. You may actually even smile with them. They're what I call these mirror neurons that seem to suggest that if what you're seeing in front of you is something that you've experienced before, you kind of evoke the same thing. There's a contagion to it. But then what happens when it isn't happiness? Right? Just as we highlighted here. How many times do we say, don't cry, it's not a big deal, right? It's okay. Or calm down when it comes to them being angry. Or settle down when someone's excited. So that's something to challenge that you're gonna, not necessarily a challenge, but something to be aware of when you find that there are different generational norms, different societal norms when it comes to emotions. And it's not by any means that I'm saying that what you grew up with, what you've experienced is wrong. That's not it whatsoever. But it's more that awareness to say that I grew up in a time or I experienced situations where for me, seeing someone angry is uncomfortable. Just like you said, like I'm not tentacle. I honor that. I completely respect that. It's absolutely there. But the question is, can I grow in my ability to be able to work with these emotions as opposed to hide away from them? That's Susan David's work kind of in a nutshell when it talks about this idea of emotional agility. So instead of it only being where happiness is what you can experience, how does each day have a value, even if it's something that's sad or angry or frustrating, something outside of that? One of the things that I really like that she captures is that every day doesn't have to be the best day ever, and that's okay. Right? Just even hearing that, isn't that reassuring? To be able to hear that, hey, every day didn't have to be the best day ever. And there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with having a sad day, an angry day, a bad day. That in itself, as I'll talk about in just a little bit, could be the support that an individual needs to hear. And if you can authentically, genuinely embrace that, that can be a really powerful impact to that individual's life. So I know sometimes I usually like to pause here because there's a lot of information I just shared, right? The biology of emotions, this work from Susan David. So I'm happy to take any clarifying questions at this time in the middle here about anything that's been said so far as relates to this idea of emotional agility or emotion validation. No questions yet?
I've got a question.
Yeah, please.
Like I said, I would run away from somebody who's really angry, not run away, but you know, not go
Yeah,
there.
shy away from it.
So what could you do different? What could I do different to not go away from it, to maybe, you know, approach that person?
Perfect. One, there's still research on this and why exactly it has an impact. But being able to label for ourselves the emotion can have a tremendous benefit. So for example, if I say to myself that I feel uncomfortable, you don't say it out loud, but being able to give yourself that agency to label the emotion can actually help clarify kind of your mind and your state of being at that point in time. So it's a nice way to almost like, I call it reset. So in that situation, if someone comes in angry and it's my natural habit would be to run away or kind of not, you know, interact with that situation. If I was able to say to myself, I'm uneasy, I'm nervous, whatever the emotion is that you feel, that oftentimes can give that second look to say, is the reason why I'm acting this way right now because of what I'm used to, what I'm comfortable with in this situation? And if I can grow, I can do something different, that could be the push to build a new habit. It's not easy. That wasn't one of the intents I have here, but talking about this idea was called neuroplasticity. So the ability for your brain to adapt to the situation and whatever experiences you've had can absolutely happen. So your brain's not a static organ. It constantly can change based on what you do. And as I do something different, your brain will actually build these new neural connections inside of it. But it's not what your brain's going to prefer to do. It's going to prefer, this is what I'm used to doing. Let's keep doing it. But that type of awareness to say, this is how I usually would act and not talk about it, if I can get in a habit of doing more and more to try to talk about those openly, you'll see that actually may become your new pattern down the road.
I work in healthcare and, you know, you can always get some people go nuts, so to say. And you know, that you talk about it as honoring how someone feels. It's kind of the same thing when you de-escalate. You know, you don't go and say, oh, you shouldn't be upset about your surgery being 3 hours later. You go and you say, you know, you let them complain. The most important thing is just to listen, because sometimes there is a little something you can do to help. My surgery's 3 hours late and I'm sitting here freezing. You give them a warm blanket, you know what I mean? Or you can say, they have 10 more minutes in this surgery and probably 15 or 20 minutes will be getting in. Do you need to call your spouse because you know, you don't let them in enough anymore? But just like you said, acknowledging it.
Absolutely. And that's where it's up to you what terms, like, I like to use that word honor. For others, it's I acknowledge it. For others, they'll say it's okay to feel this way. That's where it's whatever your authentic style is the best way to go. And you mentioned about de-escalation. That's exactly what now some of the tactics are to be able to de-escalate, whether that's in a first responder emergency type of situation, is using the exact same tactics here. Right? Being able to identify the emotion that's happening there and again, acknowledging it or honoring it in some way.
What I like about that too, in reference to the question about like, well, what could I do differently, right? If this is my normal response, and kind of what you explained about taking a beat to kind of reset and recognize, okay, well, I'm uncomfortable. And I like the fact that it's not necessarily that you do have to do anything different, but it's maybe that moment to give you, instead of reacting without thinking it through, it gives you a second to pause and kind of reevaluate the situation. Maybe it is, if someone's really angry, maybe it is a situation you need to run away from or avoid, right? Maybe that person, maybe this isn't something that you feel like, doesn't feel like you can safely enter into. But if you have the moment to think about it, you might also go, oh, wait, this doesn't seem as, maybe there is something I can do, right? And maybe you would say, then decide to ask, are you okay? Is there something I can help with? Or, so it gives the opportunity to take a different approach, even if you don't take a different approach. It just gives you that opportunity.
And then the normalizing of all emotions is another big impact to this. And one of the other takeaways that I really enjoy about Susan David's work is exactly this. Every day doesn't have to be the best day ever. Right? If you think about, let's say since the new year, I mean, can we imagine that every day was the best day ever? That you are what, 65 times happier now at this point in 2022? How is that sustainable? Right, you're just setting yourself up for failure here. Then I have to go into tomorrow thinking it was better than today, and that it was better than the day before. It's the idea that, can I be okay with understanding that all of these emotions have a place? And the power that it seems to have is that because it becomes normalized, I don't then, or individuals don't get that sense of what's wrong with me then for feeling sad. What's wrong with me for feeling angry? What's wrong with me for feeling disgusted or embarrassed? And that's never the intent, right? It's the idea that these emotions all have a value. There's nothing wrong with you for experiencing them. And to be able to communicate that to an individual, especially in a time where they may feel that they're not having that confidence or they're unsure of themselves, that's where this is something I want to spend quite a bit of time talking about. Some of the research that's come out recently highlighting that if there's a friend or family member that is able then to communicate to someone, let's say going through breast cancer, they're from diagnosis to treatment to potential surgery, they find that here, if that family member, that friend, that close connection is able to genuinely highlight that I understand that you feel X. has a tremendous impact on that individual. There's research to show that the amount of resiliency that the individual can have, the amount of perseverance that they can have, grit that they can have to go through this journey. And that's why I was so proud and so happy to be able to present here today, because this finding in itself, I think, is one that can be absolutely game-changing for an individual's life. Right? To be at that point of extreme vulnerability, to be at that point of complete uncertainty, to be at a point where there's so many questions. If you now are or have someone who's able then to talk to them and say, I understand it's okay to feel X, that support can be extremely changing and supportive to that individual. And it's not that long ago when it was that this research really wasn't covered. So I'm happy to be able to present that here and just the power that that can have.
When you get up, will you get me my yearbook?
I was just
Can you
gonna
reach
say
it?
that,
It's underneath
you
there.
know, when somebody is.
What?
diagnosed with breast cancer, for instance,
No, but I need it
People would
later. I want to
say,
look at something.
It's gonna be okay, or I'm sure everything is gonna work out for
It's
you.
right there, underneath there.
What a different way that is to approach it, you know.
What?
Your value.
College, the,
That because.
It's
you know
green
how it's
elms.
okay, first of all, and the person who's been diagnosed could, not speaking for everybody, would have a lot of negative feelings, fear, anger, all those things, and because people are uncomfortable with that, you know, they're more likely to say it's gonna be okay, but just to acknowledge and honor those feelings by saying, that's a good statement, I understand why you feel that way. You might not know what they're going through because you haven't experienced it, but you're kind of showing them that you might feel the same way if it were you.
And that you're allowed to feel.
And that
this.
you're allowed.
That's another way that I think oftentimes we'll see individuals communicate this is you're allowed to feel angry. You're allowed to feel sad. I always like to partner it with, there's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way. There's so many times where the aftermath is like, oh, why do I feel sad? You don't. So what's wrong with me? Right? All these questions that then can happen and spiral on top of then that uncertainty in that situation. You'll find that so many times that power of saying, I understand you feel this. You're okay. It's okay to feel this. There's nothing wrong with you when you feel this way. You can find that may be some of the greatest emotional support that that individual is needing at that particular point in time. I'll share with you in just a moment, as we talked about with regards to social media, there's a lot of evidence that now, because it's in kind of a closed doors setting, what I mean by that is I'm not necessarily seeing that face to face. It allows for a little bit more of anonymity behind it. So you kind of see what people may actually be interested in. That does support just how powerful these types of messages are and the interest that's out there within the community to have these thoughts validated. Some of the things I wanted to add to this that also seems to help. So physiologically, when an individual is overwhelmed with emotions, you'll find that the best way to describe it is your brain gets hijacked by that high emotional state. So the brain itself has kind of three different parts to it. That outer shell is called the cortex, the cerebral cortex. And that's a really important set of circuitry that's good for or specialized for things like planning, reasoning, controlling your impulses, regulating your emotions, like all this good conscious stuff. But when you get to that high emotional state, those circuitries actually turn off. So you can't think properly. You're not going to be able to control your impulses. You can't regulate your emotions, right? You're seeing red. So I highlight that here because if I can label the emotion before that hijack happens, that I think is what Amy, you're mentioning about. I may be able to take that pause and try to think through that situation more clearly. And why I think that's important is that if I think about it, let's say in the journey that someone goes through and I now get the diagnosis, my brain may be hijacked at that point in time. So is that the time for me to learn all about the resources that are available to me? I might not be able to think properly in that state of mind, right? And so thinking of it in that situation of no person on earth is immune to when that brain gets hijacked by stress. What can I do to try to de-escalate? What can I do to try to mitigate how long that happens? Honoring the emotion, working with the emotion. It's a really great goal there. So questions on that? Questions or anything to clarify? At this point in time.
Well, the word that keeps coming to mind for me through a lot of this is one, it's empathy, right? Just being able to maybe see something from someone else's perspective. But it's also, in my experience, what I found and kind of studying some of this type of work and you know, this kind of theory of acknowledging and experiencing all emotions, not trying to shut down, you know, that we often label emotions as positive or negative. And if we even take those words away and just say, well, they're all emotions, that the more you kind of let them happen and give them space to be, a lot of the time, the quicker they leave, the easier they come and the easier they go. And especially with something like, you know, I think everybody at some point has experienced that good cry, right? I just needed a good cry. And you feel better afterwards. And the more you fight it and shove it down and try to, you know, intellectually or cognitively control that, often the more it bubbles up until the point where you can't.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason that I love this, because it goes back to the escalation. It's diffusing, you know, by whether it's giving yourself the space or giving someone else the space to experience what they need to in that moment.
Absolutely. And when you mention empathy, that's such a synergistic topic to this. And another statement that often we encourage are things such as, I don't necessarily have to agree with what that individual is experiencing, but I want to be able to understand it. So it's that I don't have to agree that you're angry right now or that you're frustrated right now, right? That's not my place for it. But can I understand that that's happening? That must be important to you. And am I interacting with you in a way that communicates that this is that importance to it? It has the gravity then to it.
Something to say. I've talked the whole time.
Yeah, that's okay.
Although I could, reminds me of, I would be ED, and I worked with financial aid on head set up all day. I talk to people. And I had someone today, and she was so down, you know, so mad at ED. Everything is wrong. We're pulling our kid out because of this and this and this and this and this. I know all the routes she took was correct, but it was the end of the road, really and truly. They were not going to get the financial aid. What would I do? I did say, I understand. And she calmed down. She listened. I couldn't fix it. You know, it's not going to change it. But I told her, I do understand your feeling. And then we were able to talk, you know. But before that, she just wanted to explode and boom, boom, and you're this and they're that and they're that and everything. So I agree with that, understand. Just telling her that. And my voice tone too. You have to have a soft tone. Say, I understand.
Right. And every single one of us has that voice, and that power of authenticity is really exceptional in this process. And that's where whatever your approach is, that authentic approach to it is really going to have a tremendous impact on this outcome. I noticed you can imagine probably what's the opposite if I was to say to that individual, calm down.
She would yell more.
You got it, right? You're
I
gonna
would
get the
talk to your
opposite effect.
supervisor. What is your name? What is your last name? How do you spell it? Call the president.
Emotions are a very tricky thing. And even in this conversation this evening, you often hear words like just sad or just crying. And even that word just, isn't that interesting that we don't have to say that for happiness? Well, I'm just happy. So you're like, why do I need to then, try to coax myself that it's okay here by saying just for angry or just for sad? So there's a lot of things that absolutely we have stored in our brains and in our neural circuitry about emotions. I think the more that we can become aware of that and how it may affect these interactions is a really great way to build these new habits, especially in 2022. I think it's encouraging. I want to just show you then some of the evidence that we've seen. So since I've been able to now be on board with Au Naturel, we've posted, can't even imagine what this number of times is compared to what it was in the past, which is great from a data collection standpoint, right? So let's talk about hundreds, maybe over the course of the year, different posts. What I'm going to share with you are our two most interacted with and engaged posts out of the entire year. Curious if you can see the common thread between them. So this was one, we do a Sunday inspiration campaign where every Sunday we try to find some sort of motivational or inspirational quote. So we didn't create this, right? But it was a great way to be able to connect with our community. And this was then the #1 post that we had in 2021. And that you're allowed to scream, you're allowed to cry, but don't give up. And then the second one. Never be ashamed of scars. It means you're stronger than whatever tried to hurt you. These are the two most interacted with and engaged posts, likes, views, etc., all these different KPIs. But I thought it was so valuable to share that here because between the two, I think it's so congruent with the message of this evening in that what? It's communicating what to the individual. I understand, great.
Validating how they feel.
It's okay, right? That and they do it in different ways, right? It's okay to scream, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to cry, right? The idea that if you feel ashamed, that's normal. These are human responses. There's not, I like what Amy said, there's not a good or bad emotion. Right? We created that kind of construct to it. We've had these for years, right? For millennia in terms of our evolutionary code. We more recently came up with the idea of putting them in these buckets of, well, that's a good emotion and that's a bad emotion. They certainly all have a value. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here to begin with. And to supplement that, we have a very courageous customer of ours who has been a little bit more of our brand ambassador. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to play this here, but over the summer, as well as then more recently, a few weeks ago in February, she's been able to then tell her story. And the common theme has been this idea of supporting confidence. I think that's, again, a really powerful sentiment of how is it that when an individual is vulnerable, that they're authentic about their journey, how it is and how easy it is to be able to make that type of connection. It's what it means to be the science of human. Like that's what we're driven by, that ability to connect, and emotions are often the driver to then make those connections happen. And so we found that with her story and her sharing her story, she shared it there from the beginning with the diagnosis process and the uncertainty that she felt, to then going through treatments, to then going through surgery. And then more recently, she talked about then, after surgery, the dating scene and dating again, finding intimacy. And I truly am just empowered by her story and just how incredible it was for her to be courageous and really transparent in what she shared. And that was the other biggest source of traffic that we found, was people connected a lot to her story. It was a way to be able to validate what others have been going through with this as well. And I wanted to bring that here because I think that's so congruent with your mission, and that the support that you provide here, the connections that you make here, and the impact that you have as well is very similar to the story that she had. And she has a slightly different approach in the way that she communicates. She says very much that it's okay for you to be angry in these situations. It's okay to be sad in these situations. She very much then, her way of working through this was encouraging that, looking at the day and saying, what went well? It's like, that's great. Whatever it is that maybe your story, your filter, your way of looking at this is absolutely one that then we really encourage. And I think it's very consistent with then what we do. And you have the packets in front of you and things along those lines. And I thought that was such a great way to kind of capture this idea of supporting confidence, right? Whether that's through products, whether that's through connections, whether that's through talking with someone, saying, I understand this. There's a lot of evidence that suggests, especially during the COVID times, how powerful it is to be able to pick up the phone and call someone, right? That ability to connect with them and hear their voice, that's changing their voice or being able to, can be a powerful impact. So a lot of things that you're probably already doing, things that you probably already may have known. But one of the things that I hope that was able to take away from this, and then I would love to be able to answer it, any additional questions or things you'd like, is just highlighting how we're a social species at the end of the day. The last 2-3 years has certainly been a challenge for many of us because of that maybe inability to be as social as we desire, or to be able to see people, connect with people as easy as we can. These are hard times. But it also highlights on how important it is that each and every single one of you, your support base, the people around you can be to your ability then to work with your emotions, not just certain ones. So I know it's a relatively short presentation, but was kind of the goal that I had with this.
Oh, she's
She
gonna
just
talk.
started.
She did, yes, unfortunately, you're not gonna be able to hear
Oh,
it.
that was fun.
I know, but I couldn't get the audio to work with it, so unfortunately.
We gotta read.
But
You can hear. What?
can you? I wasn't able to get the, I was trying to beforehand, but I figured I'd at least kind of tell those. You can see them online, you know, this is not a sales pitch, but certainly if you do want to go, her story is incredible. We did a series over the summer for 4 weeks, then we just did one in February as it related then to her finding those connections again and relationships again. So absolutely really powerful situation where she talks about. She's also with her wigs. Her wigs became really a great way for her to be able to identify with her journey and empowering her. So there's a lot of different things that are out there to really assist in that process. But certainly what I wanted then this second half to really be was, you know, questions that you have about this. I know there's always a lot of questions about emotions. They're usually a topic that is of interest to a lot of people. And so I am happy to provide any additional insight, recommendations as it relates to it.
So for anyone who wanted to maybe, you know, learn a little bit more about this, kind of pursue this, what is do you have a recommendation on a book, or, you know, what's a good resource for someone that isn't too technical with maybe the neuroscience part of it and everything, but just kind of starting to explore that if this is new to them and it interests them, to explore that idea of emotional agility, emotional validation. Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, there's two. I would certainly recommend Susan David's work.
Okay.
I think the one related to emotional agility would be excellent. I've read it. I know that you have as well. It does have a little bit more of a leadership feel to it, but it is one that I would certainly recommend. And then I think right now, Brené Brown's work is always great. I love the two podcasts, again, more leadership style, but I think it's very congruent with the work that you do, right? You're leaders. You make this impact. You are influential in the lives of the world, of the people around you. So I think Brené Brown's books, her podcasts especially, are great to listen to. She has a lot of individuals. I think Susan David actually was on one of her ones just recently, a few weeks ago. And I think it's very synergistic with the work that was done here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then in popular media, I mean, especially if you have kids or grandkids of your own, you'd be amazed to see, but the newer Disney movie with Encanto and the amount of attention that has received is honestly one that is a big paradigm shift in the way that we talk about emotions, because, I mean, not to spoil the movie, it's an animated movie, but the whole premise behind it is the idea of accepting that things aren't okay, and that how do I work with that? Right? You may have this ideal of what perfection is and what power is, but it really is that vulnerability and emotional agility. That's the core theme of it.
There was another movie. Was it a Disney Pixar maybe? And it was all emotions were characters.
Inside Out.
Inside Out. That's right.
And so there's a lot of argument that this Encanto movie is like superseding that, but both are very much in alignment with one another. Talk about the new kind of zeitgeist or the new view of emotions is not necessarily pushing these down, but more of how do I work with them.
Right.
So I think all of those are really great ways to kind of see how the theme and the conversation is changing around those.
I'm the opposite of Amy. I am the I like the neuroscience type stuff of it. But do you, and this isn't really that, but do you think that maybe one of the reasons why so many people are depressed today, is it that more people are depressed, which is true, or do you think that now we're labeling it, which is probably, you know, they used to call it melancholy in the olden days or something, but do you think some of it is because, you know, no kid can feel bad because they lost the baseball game, they all get to get trophies and stuff, and so nobody gets, you know, if you were little kids, you lost and you felt bad and you know, and but it was expected, you know, and you dealt with it. And it seems like you don't let kids maybe deal with it now. It's always supposed to be happy. Oh, you know, oh, you lost, but that's okay. We're gonna go out for pizza. You know.
Yeah, it's a great question. It is good. It's a challenging one to answer in one succinct way. So I'm going to provide a few different pieces of evidence to hopefully answer that question. So I want to start with actually the youngest generation right now. So this is children that would be between the ages of, let's say, newborn to 5, somewhere in that age right now. There's actually evidence to suggest that that is going to be the most resilient generation that has ever existed, because you're seeing more and more parenting trends. So they'll be, let's say, of my age right now, which is embracing that type of emotional agility in that parenting style. And it's not necessarily saying to a child that don't cry or don't be upset. It's okay to be angry now. I see that you're angry now. I see that you're sad right now, and working with that emotion as opposed to then only certain ones. Right? Going back to that idea of those different social constructs of be happy, right? And like what you just mentioned there. So that's a big one. That question about then looking at the diagnosis and increase in diagnosis that you see for major depressive disorder, that's a challenging one. Probably if I had the answer to that, I'd be who knows where in terms of that type of research. But there are compounding factors that are likely contributing to the elevation that we see of those rates. You do see evidence related to social media, especially those that are in women, young women, teenage girls, and in particular the rates of mental health concerns in that particular demographic correlates very strongly with the advent of social media. So that likely is contributing with regards then to the mental health side of things. You're also seeing an increased discussion about mental health. And as a result of it, you're seeing more and more individuals be educated about diagnosis as it relates to those. As you had mentioned in the past, they may have been considered not at that clinical level, but by today's standards, because of our education around it and the benefits of that diagnosis, you may then be seeing a reciprocal increase in the diagnosis of those disorders.
I also think too that there's a difference between, and I think it's a challenging because it is such a complex thing, right? Like, you know, teaching, say, children to kind of, you know, it's okay, brush it off, dust it off, right? Like it's sad, you didn't win that one, but that's, you know, that's okay, don't be sad, whatever. But that's a fine, that's kind of a high level example of sometimes what creates a deeper problem with, again, kind of shutting it down, right? Like always trying to make it okay, and or not letting it be okay to be upset about it, but to make it okay instead. And like, I know we've got a family situation right now going on where a family member we love is dying, and my husband, you know, was like, he had a breakdown and he kept going, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I said, don't be sorry, you are supposed to cry. This is what you're supposed to be feeling, and it's okay. But you could tell it was, he just kept wanting to get it under control. He didn't want to feel it. He didn't want to deal with it. And the reaction of I'm sorry, to me, what I saw was, you know, that generation of, and he's in his mid-40s, so it's not even like he's like that old or that young, but a generation of men in particular who were brought up that you're not supposed to show that kind of emotion. You're not supposed to, you know, honor that, right? You're supposed to just be tough and hold it in and buck up. And so I think that's the challenge. It's that fine, you know, it's that it's one example isn't a big deal, but then it becomes every other example and every other experience and every other lesson that is taught.
And if you extrapolate from that, right, let's say that was the message growing up, you can see how it may be challenging then to say to someone, it's okay to be angry, because I've instilled as that cultural norm, well, don't be angry, right, or don't be sad. And you can see how, going back to what I talked about before, like your brain has these emotions for a purpose, but you don't have an outlet for it. It's not socially acceptable to be able to have those necessarily expressed.
I did want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
You were talking about the most resilient, and my granddaughter is 5. And you are so right about that. I came from a generation where you keep your emotions inside, you really don't talk to people. That's probably why I talk all the time now, because these people are letting me do it. But we don't, or everybody should feel this way, and if you don't feel that way, then don't talk about it or go get a pizza. You know, that's what we used to do. My daughter grew up in my household, she's now 40. She's raising the granddaughter. I am so impressed that I sit there just to listen to her, how she's teaching her. She went even, we went skating to, what is it, whatever, that skating place is, I forgot the name of it. But anyway, she never skated before. She said, I'm gonna do it, put it on, go out there. You know, she deals if somebody hits her, whatever. She doesn't have this, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna back off like me or something like that. I'm actually learning. I'm learning from that. There's another program I watch on television. I don't know what the name of it is, about children with, well, they're really adults with Down syndrome. I love this show. And the mothers sit with them, they're in their 30s, and they're teaching them about emotions and how to feel. And I think that's so great. I wish that I had that, although, you know, my mother and father, they didn't have that, so they can't teach what you don't have. I would like to go to these classes constantly to learn, even at my age, how to deal and talk with people, you know, because I don't want to make people feel sad. I don't want to, you know, I don't know how to deal with people who are mad at me. And I want to learn, even at my age, I want to learn. So I think that's great what you said. I just wanted to add on that because she is 5 and she's amazing. I mean, she hurts for a minute, you know, they go through that and they take care of it, or like you said, understand, and she can get through things. I couldn't, a couple of months ago, I couldn't walk with my leg, and I was working from her home because I was doing that during the pandemic, and I couldn't walk. Grandma, it'll be okay. I'm going to help you. I will help you upstairs. She helped me walk upstairs, and it's just they can get through things. And she was 5, and I'm like, wow. I felt stupid.
No, and it's not that there's a right or wrong, you know, cultural norm. But it's where there is that different approach and what we're seeing from.
I like to see that.
We have 2 little ones as well at home, and our oldest will be 5 at the end of this month. And what you just described is exactly her. And you'll see the emotional outburst, but it's like a flip of the switch. It happens, you validate it, and she works with it. And I look at that, I'm like, I wish I had that ability, right? I'm angry and I don't talk to anyone for the next day. I'm like, wow, you have a better set of being able to work with this.
And my daughter, who's now 40, who I wasn't able to teach all that because I didn't know all that. She works in the daycare. She's a teacher in the daycare. She's been working there for 8 years. They want her to be the assistant director. I'm like, how'd you learn that? I didn't teach that to you. I don't know where you got that from. But I'm glad that they are getting all of this.
Right, and it is a skill. I mean, you can build these new pets. It's not easy, right? And there's a lot of things that don't wear it, but the benefits of it are really tremendous. So I'm so happy to be able to present this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And I think what's really neat about something like this is, you know, we always kind of say for these presentations, the goal of an event like this is really just to expose our membership and our community to new ideas, right? And anything like this, almost anything we present, often it's a jumping off point. It's the beginning of a learning process. And, you know, something like this type of work, the great thing is you can keep going with it. You are learning. You're learning from your granddaughter and your daughter and being here. And, you know, it does take practice, right? Like I've been studying this kind of work for a long time, just more within myself even. But it does take work. And when you slip up, you acknowledge that, you know, if you have a reaction that maybe isn't the way you wanted to, or you're realizing, oh, I find myself at times kind of reverting. I work within the cancer community a lot, you know, people dealing with challenging and life-threatening situations and a lot of emotion. And it takes a lot of work for me to remember to not go to that default of it's okay, don't cry, or no, like it'll be all right, or to say these kind of very cliched trite things that don't really have a lot of substance or meaning behind them. They're really about making us feel better. And I think that's really what kind of, to me, what Erik has talked about tonight is what it sums up to me, is that when you take the time to validate someone else's emotions, you're making it about them and not yourself. you're making whatever they're experiencing about the way they feel and not the way you feel about the way they feel.
Yep.
And I think that's a gift right there, right? And that's something that I think is needed in when you go through a cancer experience, a breast cancer experience. We had our October presentation was on cancer culture. We had a lot of people having a lot of examples of things that have been said to them that feel very either dismissive or tone deaf, ignorant about the situation, and how much different it can be when someone just says, I'm really sorry that you're going through this, or yeah, I understand that this must be very hard. I can't really imagine, but I understand.
And I just wanted to say something really important, as I've told a lot of people here already today, it's been the Breast Cancer Network. That has really helped me. It's been how many years? Maybe about 3-4 years ago, whenever I started here, 5 years ago. I can't lost track of time. But the first thing that got me here was there was an ad in the paper, because I was feeling very down, very depressed, and it said for emotional support. And I came here, and it was the best thing ever. There's been so much. It saved my life here too. I had a bad operation. We had a doctor here from Roswell. He saved my life. And then we had the pandemic. And I tried to stay positive, but by myself alone, it started to go down. So today I saw the presentation, it was going to be on this, and someone told me to come back. And I really am happy I came back. I told people at UB today, I said, I'm going to see my friends that I haven't seen in years, and I need this. So thank you, everybody.
We're so glad you're here. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that vulnerability. That's
It's hard for me. I don't like to usually show that. I'm doing it.
We understand, and it is absolutely,
It's
it's
true, because
okay.
And my family, they love me, but they can't really identify really with a lot. And even coming today, I mean, I heard a story that surprised me that I wasn't alone, And then I have someone here that makes me feel like when I started, and there's Judy, there's you are over there.
Yeah.
Management.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. And I'm sorry I talked so much.
No, don't
I
be,
know
we're
I-
glad
nobody else
to
can.
have your
Sorry. I'm not
contributions.
supposed to say that, right?
No, we're glad to have your contributions. Eric, I don't think we don't have any more questions in the chat. Does
Okay.
anyone else have anything they'd like to ask or add about kind of tonight's topic? I would love just if you'd kind of wrap it up and give us just another talk about Au Naturel and how the business boutique can be of support with the work you guys do there for our community.
I really think of that word honor, right? I know it sounds like a broken record, but I think that word captures what you shared, right? I may not understand completely, but I honor that this is an important event for you and that this is an important resource for you. And that's the sentiment that we have at Au Naturel Boutique as well, is we want to honor you, we want to honor where you want to be and provide you that assistance. So we do have certified fitters that are able then to provide post-mastectomy breast forms. These are high quality from Amona breast forms that are able then to go into a specialized bra that we carry that then is able to provide that security and comfort as it then relates to your journey. And that's, again, the message really is supporting confidence. And so if you or anyone else that you know who may be exploring that option, we are always available and happy then to assist you in whatever way and shape and form that we can.
And I would just like to add on, having been out to the boutique not too long ago, I really loved, I remember being a little girl and going with my grandmother to a bra boutique to get a post-mastectomy bra and her prosthesis, and everything was kind of beige and large and boring. And I was really impressed when I walked into Au Naturel, not only for this, the space is comfortable, the people are warm and caring, and they actually have wonderful, they had swimwear and a whole variety of bras, and it's not just post-mastectomy, or prosthetics, it's to fit, if you've had a single mastectomy, if you used to have had breast bound reconstruction. Not every woman can wear a traditional maybe underwire bra, and they have a variety of options. So it's just really nice to know that here in our local community, we have a place dedicated to helping us feel great in our skin. Because even me, I tried all kinds of different bras after my surgery. And when I finally bought a bra that was meant for me, that was actually designed by a survivor and kind of built for my changed body, was a game changer. It was like, oh, I feel good. I felt confident. I felt sexy. I felt happy to be wearing a bra again. And it made me feel like myself. And so we're very fortunate to have them here in this area. So if you're ever in the need, they're a great resource. All right. Well, thank you, Erik.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to present.
We are so glad to have you. I'm going to come up and just wrap up with a couple things. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I know it was an intimate group tonight, but sometimes those are actually the best because people do feel comfortable, speaking up maybe what you wouldn't have if it was a bigger group. And we, of course, had a nice turnout on Zoom. And to our wonderful kitchen team, thank you. That soup was incredible. We appreciate you. Let's see, just a couple of reminders. We have classes, right? We have our live classes going on. We are sticking with our policy that to come into the facility, you must be vaccinated. We are following the Erie County mandate option of masks are optional. We will do what is comfortable. I know with some of the classes and the groups, people are kind of trying to be kind and take each other's temperature about what's comfortable for everybody there. So we want to encourage you, if you are feeling inclined and you need to get out of the house and a spring is maybe coming, we are here. We are looking forward to seeing your faces. We understand if for you right now, Zoom is still a better option. We will continue our speaker series on Zoom as well as in person. And our next speaker event is in April. So I don't remember the date right now. It's the second Tuesday of the month in April. And we are actually going to have Dr. Sunnywala from Roswell Park is going to be coming and talking with us about new treatments and therapies in the breast cancer space, which is always a popular topic. And from my understanding, I think there are some relatively newer and very important and relevant things for him to talk about. So we're excited to have him. In May, we are going to be honoring and acknowledging and talking a bit about metastatic breast cancer and how to, what to be aware of as a woman impacted by breast cancer, what to be aware of when it comes to the possibility of recurrence, as well as honoring those in our community and making sure, how you can support someone who's living with a stage 4 diagnosis, and ensuring that they are still an important and recognized and welcome part of our community as a whole. I think that's all I've got. Anybody else? Anything I missed?
Well,
Yeah.
No.
No. Do I volunteer? Do you want to say something about volunteers?
What
or-
that would be, I guess. Do you
Yeah.
want her to
So a
mention
couple
them?
other things, we still have our support groups going on. I know one of them is tonight. We typically hold it after this meeting. All of that information about support groups is on the website. We are always looking for volunteers. So if you're so inclined, looking for something to do, we have it's pretty flexible schedule as far as, any kind of commitment. If you just would like to help out and, meet some people and be part of a great community, we'd love to have you. And I think there's information on the website as well about how to get in touch if you want to volunteer. And we are open, the facility is open. So, we have scheduled hours during the day where you can come stop in. We've cleaned up our library. It's quite lovely. We've got some great bookshelves of books you can come and peruse. We still have our art classes going on. We have our little meditation room. And there's always someone here when the facility is open. If you want to come pick up some brochures or business cards or seek any kind of resources or support. Yeah, okay. So we're going to wrap up. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. We're really glad to have you. For those of you online, thank you for joining us, and hopefully we will see you next month, if not sooner.
April 12th.
April 12th, there we go. Thank you. All right, April 12th, if not sooner. Thanks, everyone.